Well, thank you all. I hope that you've learned something. And I hope you'll agree that this was an extremely powerful film about an extremely critical issue, especially at this time. I want to thank all of you for taking time on a very busy evening to join us. I want to thank Miami-Dade College, which really is the incubator of dreamers, has been for a long, long time. Cosmos, who's always there for us, and bought the food for the reception. I believe this is being live streamed right now. Do we have any dreamers here? Let's hear it for the dreamers. Okay. Roughly 70,000 young, wonderful people have applied and have gotten a temporary reprieve under deferred action for childhood arrivals. Florida has the 5th largest number of such dreamers. There's so much at stake for these youth right now, especially in this election cycle. I'm getting lots of calls from dreamers asking me, what's going to happen after the election. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can tell them that is going to give them peace of mind. We can only hope, and for those of you who pray, that once this election is over, Congress will finally step up to the plate and do the right thing. I first met Juan after one of our attorneys had been at the Broward Transitional Center giving a Know Your Rights presentation, and met Juan's mother, who urged Colleen Corrigan, our attorney, please help my sons, please help my sons. And when I went out the next morning, I knew what I had to do is get a statement from them so that folks in Congress and the media and others could hear in their own words what they were going through and what it would mean if they were deported. I wanted to meet with the mom and the 2 boys, but I wasn't allowed to because they wouldn't let them be together, male and female. And I knew time was against us, and so took the statement, went back to the office, sent it out to everybody I could think of, and then the phone didn't stop ringing off the hook. And the students that stood up and fought for Juan, let me tell you something, I couldn't keep up with them. What a bunch of smart, energetic, wonderful folks. And, it really takes a village. Before I introduce the panel, I just want to say that Lincoln Diaz-Balart, when he was in Congress, tried to help introduce the private bill in the House, but it wasn't enough to stop their deportation. Ana Navarro, who's a Republican and is on CNN all the time, was the one who told me that Senator Dade was going to be at the Biltmore Hotel and arranged for me to bring Juan and Alex to meet with him. Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen was great. And the media really covered this story from beginning to end. Juan had a work permit for 5 years. 5 years. So when he applied for deferred action under the Childhood Arrival Program, they already knew that he was eligible for this kind of relief. He'd already had his fingerprints taken for 5 years in a row. And at some point, there was an 8-month backlog in terms of processing these applications. I reached out to the head of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services trying to make the case. I didn't hear back. I wanted to go to the media. One wouldn't let me, and I understand why. And he left for Brazil in August of 2013, and 2 months later, we got the notice from USCIS that they were intending to deny his application. Why were they intending to deny it? Because he'd been out of the country for 2 months. The good news about Juan is today is his first day of classes at Harvard University in the MBA program. So we have an amazing panel. I'm going to introduce them. I'm then going to ask them each one question, and then we're going to open it to questions from all of you. Aldo Bhayo, an Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker. He's also a TV producer. He and his wife founded Mind and Media. He was born in Santiago, Chile. He has a master's from the University of Maryland in TV and film. In 2005, Washingtonian Magazine named Mind and Media one of the 55 greatest places to work in the region. And the Washington Business Journal, likewise, said that Mind and Media was one of the 50 best places to work in Greater Washington. This film won several awards, I think 2 Emmys. It was the best of the festival at the Washington Independent Film Festival. And I remember when I first met Aldo, I was so struck by how compassionate he was, how caring, how meticulous about what he was doing, how patient he was, a real delight to work with. Manny Diaz, for those of you from Miami, he needs no introduction. He was our fabulous mayor of the city of Miami twice, and for 2 terms. He was chosen to lead the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and he did an amazing job doing that. He was a former member of Department of Homeland Security's Advisory Council. He's always been fighting for fair and humane treatment of immigrants. And he's always been there for the dreamers. And I remember in 2012, when Manny called me, he knew that we were trying to convince the president to exercise his authority to grant these kids a temporary reprieve. And he called me and he said, "What can I do to help?" And believe me, help he did, without a doubt. He's won over 100 awards. I'm not going to take the time to list them, but I'll just list one. He was one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report and the Kennedy School of Government, the Center for Public Leadership. He's now a senior partner at Lydecker and Diaz. And finally, Gaby Pacheco, who's here tonight, even though she's not feeling well at all. Gaby is a nationally recognized human rights leader, which is pretty obvious if you saw the film. It's been such a pleasure to know Gaby and her amazing family. It's no surprise if you knew her family that she's accomplished so much, and she's got such a huge heart. She's not just smart, she's not just hardworking. Her heart is just enormous. I remember when she and the other 3 dreamers told me that they were going to be walking to Washington, D.C., and I advised them not to because I thought that folks like the Ku Klux Klan would probably be after them. They didn't listen to me, thank goodness. And I remember when I said to the 4 of them, I said, "Listen, maybe you just need to focus on the DREAM Act. Don't talk about comprehensive immigration reform because I'm not sure that's doable right now." And they went, "No, no, no, no. This is about our families too. This is about keeping families together. We're marching for all of us." And they did the right thing. She was the first Latina to testify before Congress. She testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, making the case for immigration reform. She was recently listed in Forbes magazine as one of the 30 under 30 most effective leaders in the country, and then 40 under 40 by Latinas in American politics. But now listen to this. She was recently profiled in Elle magazine, along with America Ferrera and some other notables, as the world's most accomplished 30-year-old woman. How about that? All right, Gaby, you go, girl. So my first question, Aldo, is for you. You know, what was the impetus for the film? And how has it influenced you in terms not just of immigration, but even beyond?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you guys noticed, but kind of in the middle of the film, we had a thank you to Americans for Immigrant Justice, which reappeared where it was supposed to at the end of the film. So I guess AIJ got 2 times recognition. So wanted to tell you that that middle one wasn't supposed to be there. Well, I found out about Juan by reading an article that appeared in the Washington Post magazine written by reporter Fong Lee, and the article was called "The Outsider." It appeared in February of 2009. And I had been thinking about some of the rhetoric that I had been hearing about, especially about Hispanics and Latinos, especially crossing the border, the immigrant wave that was coming into Arizona and the Southwest states. And that language bothered me quite a bit. And then when I read the article on Juan Gomez, I said to myself, this could be a great story. He's such an exceptional individual, as you've seen. As Cheryl has said, he's back in the United States now after being gone for 3 years because he got accepted to Harvard Business School, and he's going to be getting his MBA there, so that just shows. But as a soon-to-be Brazilian citizen, not as an American. And so think about that. Think about the talent that left this country, went to work in Brazil. Brazil has opened its arms to him. And he's coming back here to further his education, and ultimately he's going to be a Brazilian citizen. So bravo for Brazil.
Manny, I'm not going to ask you a question because as you told me when we were in the lobby, you could talk about this forever. So what do you want to say?
Golly. Well, the first thing I want to say is, Aldo, congratulations on the movie. I mean, really outstanding. Believe it or not, even at my age and even after having gone through all I've gone through, I still tear up every time I see something like that. So, and Gaby, bless you for everything you've done. You're only 30?
Yeah, 30.
God, I remember when I was 30. And Cheryl, I think I've known you at least since I was 30.
Right.
I was trying to remember on the way here today. Did we meet at the Haitian Refugee Center?
We
did. Oh, God. I was in law school.
Not that long ago.
I was in law school. Hey. God, there's so many things I want to say. You're right. I think the first thing I want to say is that I think, and this is sort of past, present, and future, and Juan made a statement during the film, which I found particularly important, and that is that he said that he felt as a second-class citizen. And I'm here to tell you that we all are, we have been, and for the foreseeable future at least, we will continue to be second-class citizens. And I say that because of this. In the 1960s, when I was a young man that arrived from Cuba and lived just 2 short blocks away from here, there were signs that said, no Cubans, no dogs, no Cubans need apply, and all the other things that you can imagine. And I spent the next number of years starting to get involved in local politics and local community organizations and issues, and found myself in 1980 fighting, again, a local, what was really called an anti-bilingual ordinance, which was really an English-only law, which was really, in effect, an anti-immigrant masked issue, which was a referendum, which people in Miami-Dade County voted on, and not even going to make you guess which way the people of Miami-Dade County voted. Very ugly, very bigoted campaign, which was in effect the first in the country. And then it went on to Tallahassee, where we were fortunate enough to beat it, and Washington, where we were also fortunate enough to beat it. Today, it doesn't matter that you say we should have an English-only law. In fact, it's generally accepted by even Latinos. We did not, because there was no one arguing to have anything other than English as the official language of the United States. And what it really was a pretense for saying, you're in America, you act like an American, you speak only English. And that was true in 1980, and there were people that were printing bumper stickers that said, "Will the last American please bring the flag with you when you leave Miami?" That was 1980. Then in 2000, in one of my few actual representations of an immigration client. I represented a little 6-year-old Cuban boy. And regardless of what you felt about the issue, as far as we were concerned, from a legal perspective, was does he have a due process right to go in front of a judge and be adjudicated? And our Attorney General decided that he did not, and he did not. Total discretion. But the point is that during that debate, there were a lot of people who were formerly friends, and that division that I saw in the 1960s, and I saw in 1980, resurfaced in 2000. And in 2016, I would venture to say, it is not that different. Just watch the presidential campaign. What is most distressing to me is not that the fringe, however you define fringe, not that the fringe takes those kinds of positions. The reason we don't have comprehensive immigration reform in America is because everybody else in the middle doesn't want it and isn't pushing hard enough. That's the only reason we don't have it. The fringe would be easy. Think about it. If only the KKK were opposed to comprehensive immigration reform, I guarantee you we would have it. But the fact of the matter is that there isn't enough pressure from the rest of us in America that represent whatever that middle is, that is putting enough pressure on people in Congress to pass something. And until that happens, folks, nothing will pass. And Cheryl mentioned 2012. In March of 2012, I went to the AIJ annual gala. And in fact, Aldo, I think you were getting an award there. And I sat down with Gaby and I think Carlos and the others, and they talked me through the issue. And I walked out of there and I said, I've got to do something about this. This is ridiculous, stupid. This is typical of how short-sighted we are in America. I called Cheryl the next day. I said, Cheryl, I want to do something about this. What can I do? She said, well, we got to convince this and this and that. And I said, you mean to tell me that the president could actually do something about this? She said, yes. I want you to know that I spent the next 3 months trying to convince the president of the United States, who, by the way, I strongly support, that this was the right thing to do. And along the way, I got a tremendous amount of pushback. While they were out marching around and doing their thing, I was working behind the scenes with people in the administration, people in Senator Reid's office, Univision, Telemundo, Miami Herald, everybody in the press, national organizations like La Raza, et cetera, et cetera. I called up everybody in my contacts list and said, how in the world can we not do this? How in the world is our president not going to do something which, number one, is the right thing to do? And now let's talk about politics. The last I checked, he's being called the deporter-in-chief by national Latino organizations. Why? Because he's deported more people than W did. And so, and here are the polls that have come out. I mean, there's no possible reason in the world. And by the way, we're in an election year. And as the movie showed, he needs a Latino vote. How in the world is he not going to do this? And then they said, well, there's a legal issue involved. I said, what's the legal issue? I called Cheryl, what's the legal issue here? I've got a letter from 200 of the top immigration law professors in America that says he can do this. Back to the White House and back on that fight. Then something great happens. There's a high school graduation ceremony in Miami, and Vice President Biden is here. I call his staff, I go, I've got to go speak to him. I said, okay, come meet him before the speech. I go in the back and I say to him, by the way, he had just been on Meet the Press, if some of you remember, and made the famous statement about same-sex marriage that helped the president evolve on that issue. So I walk up to him and I say, you know, Mr. Vice President, can you get on Meet the Press this Sunday? He goes, why? I said, because I need you to do something for me. You know, like you did with the same-sex marriage issue? I need you to do that on something called DACA. He goes, oh, I'm aware of it, but we're told the president doesn't have the legal authority to do it. And I went, blah, 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 blah. And he said, really? He called in his entire staff that was traveling with him, and he said, come here, listen to what Manny's saying. Blah, blah, blah. Next thing I know, there's a tremendous amount of interest from the White House staff and everyone else to get this thing done. One last step, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We have our annual conference. I draft a resolution, I'm not even a mayor anymore. I get 30-some mayors, including Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor Villaraigosa and all the major city mayors, to sign on a resolution. The White House is aware of it. The White House actually tries me to agree to revise the resolution, so the resolution only pushes for, what is it, not non-deportation, as opposed to actually provisional status and with the ability to get a work permit, the ability to get a driver's license, et cetera, as an affirmative act rather than only if you're in fear of deportation will you be able to benefit from this. They actually try to have us redraft the resolution. I call Cheryl again. Cheryl says, no, that's not what we want. I said, okay, it's not going to happen. We push forward. I get messages from the White House, you're embarrassing us. I said, well, sorry. I'm embarrassed that you're not doing this. So the vote at the U.S. Conference of Mayors is going to happen on Saturday morning. On Friday morning, you saw the press conference, the president approves DACA. It shouldn't be that hard to do the right thing.
Thanks, Manny. Gaby, you were at the forefront of an incredibly powerful national movement to move this issue forward. Where are we with that movement today? And I know that one of the things that you did from the onset was work hard to work with both Republicans and Democrats to hopefully find common ground. Can you just tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yes. Thank you so much for being here tonight. The stakes are really high for all of us. And I think it's really important to see that people like you care about this and will spend a Monday night to watch this film, to show support, but also to hear from us. So thank you for this. So the immigrant rights movement, at least from the young people, has grown tremendously and is very diverse more than ever. I was telling Aldo that when Cheryl today said, where are the dreamers? And the dreamers were all excited, like, we're here in the audience. I said to Aldo, if Cheryl would have asked that question 10 years ago, nobody would have even done this, right?
That's true.
And it's just so incredible and so amazing that people today have been able to stand up and not be afraid and feel proud of who they are and really own their identity without feeling that shame that for too long, like Manny was saying, right, we've seen in this country. That shame that we hear today from the presidential election where we are told we are the other that is not wanted in this country, that needs to leave, and that there needs to be this big, big wall to prevent us from being here. So to me, I think I love being around Manny because Manny really represents what I feel is a good politician and is somebody that does the right thing, not because of their party and where their party stands, but really where the right thing needs to be. And it's so disappointing. Today, at 2 o'clock, ABC News, and there's, the Miami Herald has been writing, or will be writing about this, the Univision has been writing about this, but ABC News talks about how President Obama has deported the most amount of people than practically all the presidents combined. Like he beat George Bush in the first 2 years of his presidency, of 8 years of Bush's presidency. And getting the president to move on DACA was an effort that just, like Manny said, was unnecessary. I remember having a conversation with Cheryl, and she was like, Gaby, I don't know if I can vote for him. And I was like, oh, okay, good. So I went to the White House and I was like, there's even white people that are saying, right? Because it's not just Latinos, right? There's your people, the people that voted you in, saying they don't know if they're going to be able to reelect you. And even getting the pressure of some of the organizations that came on board at the end to say this is the right thing to do would sit us down and say, you are going to make the first African-American president lose his reelection campaign. And so I think that today where we stand is a very scary place because Donald Trump, in my opinion, would be such a destruction to this country overall, but when you talk about immigrants, right, that's really scary. And I don't think so much because of what he believes, because he doesn't really have a belief. He just goes with whatever, right? But it's the people that he's aligned himself with and are advising him. The senators, the representatives who have endorsed him, the people that are standing behind him that are just out front, anti-immigrant, members of the KKK, have written things like, Hispanics and brown people are inferior. They are dumber than white people, right? Like these are the people that are with his campaign. But at the same time, you look at President Obama and you look at the ABC News article that came out today, and you think about what is our prospect and what are we going to do? And who is speaking for us? And who is being a leader in the White House, in Congress? And so, really it goes back to us of what are we going to do? And I know this is cheesy, and I know you hear it a lot, and right now you're being bombarded by it, but it's really in our vote. And I remember when I was student government president at Miami-Dade College, and I had a candidates forum. I don't remember, I think it was like, it was one of the local politics, and one of the people running came up, and he, got the microphone, and he said, I don't even know what I'm doing here. You guys don't matter because you don't vote. He put the mic down and he left. And everybody was just like, what just happened? But it was one of the biggest lessons that I've ever had in my life. I was completely embarrassed. Everyone in the room was like, what just happened? But he taught us all that we really don't matter. People of color in this country don't matter because we don't vote and we don't know the power of our voice. DACA was not given to us because the president one morning woke up and said, I have the idea. This is what I'm going to do. The president had tremendous pressure from people, like Manny said, all over. Any chance, any opportunity we had to get anybody to speak on this issue, we would do it. And I remember Cheryl was with us when we were meeting with the White House legal counsel folks, arguing that we can do DACA, that deferred action was something that could be given to students, to dreamers, to people that had kind of similar criteria of the DREAM Act. And we had devised, to get this letter from the law professors telling another law professor, who's now in office, that yes, indeed, he had the power to do this. And we had given the story, we had leaked the story to La Opinión, very strategic. We were going to Latino. They were trying to get the Latino vote. And we sat there, and the story wasn't coming out, and finally got a text, the story's out, and we said to them, and by the way, there's a story in La Opinión that you should check out. It's about 100 law professors who are saying that the president has the power to do this. And I remember their faces. One woman put her head down and shook no, like, oh no, it's coming for us. So all this to say that it's taken courageous acts, it's taken just people hammering and talking and screaming even, interrupting the president in the middle of his speeches and just saying, enough, you're deporting us, you are hurting our communities, you're hurting our families to get to DACA. And just DACA, something temporary that can be taken anytime away, that everyone is freaking out, those that have DACA like myself, because Trump has said the first day he's in office, he'll take it away. And every single one of us has given all of our information to the government freely. Every single one of us. The government knows where we all live. So the stakes are high, but I still have a lot of hope and faith because of people like you. And because there's people like you that I know that are gonna speak out, that are gonna, if you know, you're gonna vote, by the way, August 30th, right? Last day to vote, tomorrow. Local politics are actually more important than the national, but you know. I have hope because of all of you. So thank you again for being here, and you know, it's gonna be okay because we care.
Okay, time for your questions. How are we going to do this? Do we have someone who has a microphone? Ariella?
We can hear.
Huh?
You can probably hear.
Oh, okay.
Somebody on top there.
All the way in the back,
Go ahead.
standing up.
My question is for Aldo. First of all, thank you for Immigrant Chapter. Great story on a very similar story that where lots of people relate to themselves as well. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a follow-up story or follow-up to your creation.
Thanks. So the gentleman's asking if there's going to be a follow-up. I think there, not to this particular story. Certainly, the Department of Justice just announcing that private prisons are not going to be run by prisons are not going to be run by private companies anymore. Could be a great story. Of course, Maria Hinojosa did something about it a while back. But there will be other immigration stories that I will that I'm researching and that I will definitely make films about. Maybe shorter films, but not quite as long as this one. But yeah, there will be follow-up.
I think with the private prison industry issue, they're going to look into it. I don't think they necessarily have already committed. Roughly 70% of immigrants in detention are in facilities that are run at a great profit by private prison industry, like the GEO Group and Corrections Corporation of America. And many of us have been complaining about inhumane conditions in those facilities for a long time. They make lots of money detaining immigrants.
So check your stock portfolio just in case. CCA and Geo Group, FYI. That's true.
Another question? Yes, I see 1, 2, 3 hands, 4. How are we going to do this, Ariella? Let me see.
Go ahead. You could go.
Okay, I just wondered if you could bring everyone up to date, because the president's actions have now been ruled on by the Supreme Court as exceeding his authority. What is that?
No. It was a 4-4, it was a tie, so it was a non-decision decision.
So now we've got a situation where the court is completely, hasn't reached a decision, so this again points out the importance of the next president, not just in whether or not they're going to push for immigration reform, but whether the Supreme Court that's going to uphold immigration reform.
Yeah, well, it's different. It's different, yeah. So,
Is that difference in terms of the block in the Supreme Court as far as what's happening with DACA? Does it
Yeah.
have anything to do with it?
Yeah.
yeah. So DACA was announced in 2012. They did try to bring it up to the courts, but the courts, they said, you have, nothing. The judge said, no, there's nothing here. In November 2014, the president extended that and did what they call either DACA Extended or DACA 2.0 to allow for the people who were over the age of 30 but met all the other criteria to apply, and then also moved the deadline in 2007 to 2010. That was what was brought up, and then also DAPA. And very strategically, Republicans took it to Texas, to a Texas judge to do that. And they were more concerned, what they were trying to figure out at their legal standing was not so much on DACA. They don't really care about that. They cared about the undocumented parents of U.S. citizens or resident children. And like Cheryl said, there was no decision. The Supreme Court didn't want to go into that issue to say if the president has the power to do it or not, and they just left it. Like, their decision is blank. They just said 4-4, nothing, nothing specific. There's a lot, I'm not an attorney, but I know, like Manny said, Manny, we need to hang out more. Like Manny said, where there's a will, there's a way. If they really wanted to fight this, they would have done a lot of things. And I think the administration, there is some legal issues that they could have run across and hurt themselves in many other cases, right? When you take something to the Supreme Court, it's opening a can of worms. You don't really know what's going to happen and what legal precedents that's going to lay for other cases. But I think that the administration could have done a lot more. They didn't. And I think right now there is organizations trying to do more. There was NILC and other organizations recently brought in a new legal case to try to figure out how to fight that. But, I think once we go into whichever administration, right, if Hillary wins, this is going to be probably one of her staple things. And I want us to be cautious because she can do a lot more, right? And that's not going to be enough anymore, right? DACA extended, and DAPA is going to be amazing and great. And I think once she gets in office, her folks are going to be able to figure out, and I think that's kind of the threat, right, that it's being used in our community to say, this is why she's important. That's why mi voz es su voto, right? Kind of like the campaign that she has going on. But I think that we're going to be okay on that. And I think once Hillary, gets into office, that program, they'll figure out a way to implement that program.
I just want to add that the Supreme Court decision left in place, their non-decision, left in place a nationwide injunction. So when the president announced DAPA-DACA, there were so many immigrant families who were thrilled because, over the course of the past, number of years, so many families have been separated. So many young children have been placed in foster care when their parents have been deported. Families have been torn apart. Every day, we learn of families that are being torn apart. And they were so hopeful that something was finally going to be done that was going to give them a temporary reprieve, and that children weren't going to have to wake up in the morning wondering when they kiss their parents goodbye if they'd ever see them again. 26 states, including Florida, joined in that lawsuit that was filed in Texas. And it was just another terrible blow for immigrants, hardworking immigrants who pay taxes, who've not broken any criminal laws, lived here for years, worked hard, and there we have it. So there's been a lot of bad news lately, and it's time for things to start turning around. Other questions? Yes.
Hi guys. I just want to say thank you guys for coming out here. Something I noticed was one was just exceeded. He was extraordinary, right? And so he was multi-talented and very smart, and he still was not able to accomplish or even get his immigration status settled, even with his accomplishments. So my question is more like, how superhuman or extraordinary do you have to be for this country to acknowledge your humanity or to acknowledge your right to be educated or your right to be seen? And because of that, because one wasn't seen, so you get a brain drain. You get a brain drain out of this country where you could have used his knowledge and his his worth here, but now we get a brain drain. So how extraordinary does those dreamers have to be acknowledged here?
Well, I would argue you don't have to be as intelligent and as hardworking as Juan in order to be special and to be able to contribute greatly to our country. Ordinary immigrants every day do that. They do backbreaking work. They pay taxes. You know, they don't break criminal laws for the most part, and they love this country. This country was built on the backs of immigrants. So yes, Juan is an extraordinary case, but there are millions of immigrants in this country who I would argue are deserving of legal immigration status in this country. They've proven it time again. They prove it every day when they get up and work hard. Many of them do jobs that other people don't want. They raise their families. You know, they live moral lives. They have great principles. So as exceptional as Juan was, I would argue, you know, I mean, I see immigrants in our office. We see immigrants every day. I mean, they're not going to Harvard, but, you know, I can tell you, and I think I speak for our entire staff, that they inspire us. You know, despite so many obstacles, they accomplish so much. They don't complain. And frankly, you know, they're amazing folks, you know, sort of living ordinary lives, but except that they live with the fear of detention and deportation, but accomplishing so much in spite of that. Does anybody want to add to that?
The way that's going to change is that we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform or some legislation that will change it. And then it'll change it for a lot of people. And so as Americans for Immigrant Justice has been doing for decades, as Manny has been doing for decades, as Gaby has been fighting for the last decade, as I've done a little bit in my own way to be able to shed light on this issue so that more and more people join to help pass the legislation. That's what we need. We need all of you who are coming here tonight, if you have the power, to get involved and to help to push for this. As you saw by the documentary and as you saw by the comments made here, it wasn't easy to even pass DACA, which is, Gaby has said, is a temporary program. It could go away anytime. We need to pass the legislation. That's what needs to happen.
I think we have time for one last question.
One, a quick question about Juan's story, and two, a personal comment about a young DACA individual. By way of background, since July of 2009, we've lived this story day to day when we learned for the first time that a young man who graduated in June of 2009, number 4 in his class of almost 2,000 students at Miami High, captain of the golf team. We thought he was going to be going to Dartmouth, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and found out that, I get emotional about this, he had no status for the first time, even though we'd known this young child for 4 years. Fast forward, he got through Miami-Dade Honors College and then hit a roadblock when there was nothing like DACA available. And then in June of 2012, the president announced the availability of DACA. In August of the same year, he was able to apply. And by October of 2012, he had his DACA status, which allowed him to go to FIU, pay his way through school, and he's now on his 3rd extension. My question about Juan's story is, and I was reminded of it tonight, Juan was available, the DACA application was available to Juan in August of 2012. He could have gotten his status in October 2012. What happened? Number one. Number two, this young man who's a part of our family just recently applied for and got his extension for his for years 5 and 6. The anxiety that this young man experienced leading up to the time that the final certificate came in the mail is overwhelming. DACA is wonderful, but it is not enough. We have thousands of young people hanging on the edge. So I encourage all of us to do whatever we've got to do to press anybody we can to move forward. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. And I think I mentioned this earlier. Juan got caught up in the backlog of applications that weren't being processed in a timely manner. When deferred action for childhood arrivals was announced, it was great, but it's my understanding that they didn't have money to hire a lot of people to process the applications. Would you agree with that, Gaby? And so, you know, he made a decision that he couldn't wait any longer. He had a great job offer in Brazil and decided to take it. It broke my heart, obviously, but that was his decision to make. And Juan had told me many times, because we had gotten him a work permit every year for 5 years before we applied for DACA relief for him. And he kept saying to me, you know, I don't know how long I can just keep living, you know, knowing that it's just temporary status that can be taken away. I mean, that's a very hard thing to have to live with. Yeah, go ahead, Manny.
Yeah, I want to get back to my original statement, and that is, you know, in a sort of perverse sort of way, you almost would like not to have a DACA available and keep pressure on the politicians, because they have now been able to wash their hands and not confront the issue and just say, well, we'll just keep sort of, you know, just kind of hang out there for another 2 years and 2 years and 2 years and never have to confront the issue.
Yeah, that's right.
And the issue is doing the right thing, number one. Number two, something very important that just keeps bugging me about this issue, and it's sort of, in the last couple of questions, you know, talking about Juan and talking, Lynn, about your example, you know, it's and I related back to my my early years, my young years, and I see Gaby now, and it's this notion that, and I don't know if it's got to be true for everybody, but I mean, it's certainly true for us, okay? In 1980, when we were fighting the English-only anti-bilingualism thing, I remember so many times hearing something like, well, this isn't meant for you, because you're not like the rest of them. I mean, look at you, you don't have an accent, you're wearing a coat and tie, you're going to school, you're respectable, blah, blah, blah. And that is still true today. And so when we debate this issue, we tend to want to highlight the Juans and this one and that one and that one. And that's not going to win us over any votes, because the reaction is, yeah, well, those are good kids. And yeah, I mean, if he's going to Harvard, damn, he should stay here. And if he's a nuclear scientist, damn, he should stay here. But, you know, all those other guys that are like crossing the border or jumping the impenetrable fence that we're about to build, nah, we don't want those guys. And so you're either like a rocket scientist that's getting an MBA at Harvard, or you don't belong here.
Yep.
To your point, Cheryl.
That's a very good point.
Right? And I think that's a real problem in terms of our ability to win on this issue.
I want to end tonight. There was a column by Fabiola Santiago in the Miami Herald in late June, and this was her message to dreamers. In this moment of uncertainty and fear, stay in the course of winning. If not a legal ruling, then the hearts of this nation. Dig in deeper, regroup, make friends of your enemies. You are Americans, not Americans by the privileged geographical location of birth bestows, but Americans by choice of mind and heart. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks to our great panel. Thank you, Aldo, for the film.